Hey everybody, it's Mo Gerhart in the One Mo Moment podcast. I want to thank all of you for clicking and listening and joining. I'm learning as I go, so for those of you that are watching the video podcast, I'm sorry about the quality of video, but that's something I'm working on and hopefully we'll have fixed by the next time. And for those of you with just the audio, I'd say I'm about 95% getting that down. So lots of improvements still to come as we start moving towards the future, but definitely wanted to make sure to get this episode out to you as soon as possible. So thanks so much, enjoy, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Discover the power of a single moment with One Mo Moment. Get ready to hear the pivotal moments that have shaped the lives of extraordinary individuals. From inspirational stories and professional breakthroughs to personal anecdotes and life-changing decisions, One Mo Moment uncovers the essence of what drives us forward. Listen to conversations with industry experts, creatives, and everyday heroes, each sharing their unique journeys and valuable insights. Get ready to be inspired, motivated, and moved, because one moment has the potential to change everything. Now here's your host of One Mo Moment, Mo Gerhart.
Welcome to the inaugural episode of One Mo Moment, the podcast where we dive into the pivotal moments that shape the lives of extraordinary individuals. I'm your host, Mo Gerhart, and today we have an incredibly important figure in my life joining me. Suzy Merchant is not just a name in the world of women's basketball. She's a beacon of leadership, motivation, and integrity. With an impressive coaching career, Suzy led her teams to numerous victories, all while inspiring and nurturing the next generation of athletes and coaches. In today's episode, we'll be exploring Suzy's journey from her early days as a high school player in Traverse City, Michigan, to becoming a leading coaching figure in the sport of women's basketball. We'll uncover her life philosophies, hear about her health challenges she's overcome, and dive into the memorable moments that defined her career. But that's not all. We'll also discuss her current endeavors, how she balanced her personal and professional life, what her vision is for the future of women's basketball, and what her upcoming plans look like. So whether you're a sports enthusiast, an inspiring coach, or just someone looking for a dose of inspiration, this episode is packed with valuable insights and stories that you won't want to miss. So Suzy, welcome to the first guest and inaugural episode of One Mo Moment. It's truly an honor to have you on the show.
Well, thank you for the invite, first and foremost. And I will say that I feel like if you are going to start this podcast, it's probably appropriate that you and I both start this thing off as connected as we've been our whole lives. And what a great thing you're doing. And I can't wait to watch this podcast flourish.
Yeah, I totally, there was only one choice in my mind when I was thinking about, first guest would be, and that was obviously you. So, sort of give a little bit of that background as far as how deep those connections go and to let listeners sort of know our path and, things that we've been together. So we're both from Traverse City. That's the initial connection. So Northern Michigan kids. But it goes much deeper than that. Your dad, Glenn Merchant, he was the principal at the elementary school where I went to. On top of that, my mom was also a teacher at that same school. So your dad was also my mom's boss. On the sports side of things, my dad was your high school volleyball coach in Traverse City. But then not only that, your older brother John played baseball for my dad as he was the baseball coach for the Traverse City Trojans. And on top of that, your husband, Gary Rakin, also played baseball for my dad. So those are the initial roots. The history goes much deeper and longer even than that, but that's sort of the foundation of, how you and I first got connected.
Yeah, there's so much. Everyone always talks about 6 degrees of separation. I don't know if we've been separated by 6 degrees ever. So it's been a great journey to be alongside you and your family for sure.
Yeah, it would almost be the opposite kind of challenge where you'd have to almost try to find 6 degrees without without connecting us. I think that would be the actual challenge in this one.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
So Susie, actually, I want to start out going back to your high school career and growing up in Northern Michigan. You were a three-sport star for Traverse City. At that point in time, it was just Traverse City Senior High, what's now Traverse City Central. For the Trojans, you played softball, volleyball, and basketball, but beyond that, also involved in other youth sports, I know, growing up. But talk a little bit about what that meant to really have that variety and to be in multiple sports as opposed to nowadays when we see so many kids specializing at a young age.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to grow up in a time when there wasn't a lot of opportunity in the summer to leave your hometown and go do other things, travel, anything. So I don't know. I really do miss those days for that current athletes now, just being in the recruiting world for 31 years and watching kids 11 and 12, deciding that basketball is only going to be their sport. And truth be told, I think it helped me manage injuries probably and stay fresh and motivated and passionate about maybe one sport more than the other, but certainly I was a competitive person and it just kind of fueled you that way. And then also we had different voices, like listening to your dad talk in volleyball and the culture he built was a little bit different than Coach Anderson. He built basketball, which was a little different than Coach Page, who was doing softball at the time. So getting different voices and learning how your personality connects and what language you have to speak in order to be the best version of yourself while you're on the field or the court.
I think what's amazing is, honestly, you listen to pretty much any Division One, Power Five coaches. They all sort of have that same thought process that they love recruiting the athletes that are in the multiple sports, but yet somehow I don't think that message resonates with parents. And somehow I still think they get caught up in whether it's promotions, whether it's the teams themselves, but sort of thinking that specializing is going to be the route that's going to, help their son or daughter out the most.
Yeah, I think they've kind of lost their way with a couple things that. And I also think they start playing games way too early and that they put the focus on nothing but playing baseball games, basketball games, volleyball games, and forget about skill development. And I used to tell recruits when they were younger, like the best thing you can do is don't even worry about getting on the circuit and being seen when you're in seventh and eighth and even ninth grade. I mean, if you're a ninth grader that's getting noticed, you're a no-brainer and you're probably the number top 10 kid in the country, right? It's like it's clearly cut. There's no gray zone there. So to me, I always think kids kind of and parents lose sight of the fact that getting your skill set where it needs to be. So when you do make the circuit or you are traveling and you are playing, that your skills are where they need to be. You've honed them enough that you can hit open shots and you just need to put the time in and to be successful. And I think a lot of people think time is traveling and playing 6 games a week instead of traveling one time to play a couple of games and the rest is all about development.
Yeah, I think sort of what you were touching on when we were kids, the game aspect was more out on the playground with friends or pickup game, something along those lines. And then all the formal components of sports, that was those fundamentals, the instructions, and it's what we sort of expected when you were doing practices. But the games now, AAU, Gus Macker, it's just going on all the time. And, the pickup, sort of just fun neighborhood stuff doesn't necessarily happen anymore. And
Yeah.
because of that, I think that's where then you lose out on the fundamental side with a lack of practicing.
Yeah, I mean, I look back and just even last night when they started the NBA draft, I think the first two, I know the first one, what weren't the first two foreign kids? Because those people over from France, those guys over there, and we've recruited overseas, they put a premium on fundamentals and then play.
Yeah.
Where in America, we're completely the opposite. I think back to like growing up in Traverse City and I was a West Side kid and I used to ride my bike up to the backside of Munson Medical Center. Now it's a really nice shopping center, but back then it was a mental institution. But they had really good basketball courts. And I used to go back there and work out. And I kid people now and they're like, how did you handle people yelling at you when you were on the road and, heckling you? And I'm like, listen, I shot hoops from the time I was like 11 or 12 behind a mental institution. And I had people yelling, are you a boy or are you a girl? So I've been used to like heckling, but those are little things that, you just did growing up. And I think those are kind of lost on this next generation.
Right. You mentioned you were on the west side. I was on the east side, and I remember plenty of times, actually in my wheelchair, going past the high school. I'm on the little bike path there, on the road to my friend Kevin's house, and at the tennis courts, there'd be all kinds of kids playing tennis there, or just constantly hitting the ball off the wall. And in the background, behind there, you had the baseball field and the track, and there was just all these different opportunities. Not to mention then the gym right there too. And I know you have plenty of stories as far as going to the gym, shooting late at night, and building those relationships with the
Yeah.
coaches at that youth level. And I think that's too something that unfortunately kids don't have as many opportunities, I think, to build those sort of personal side relationships with the coaches, because so much focus is actually put on getting that scholarship or who's going to be playing or starting, and that there's just so much about life skills that is missed out.
Well, and so much emphasis now on recruiting is through the summer. I mean, it used to be all high school coaches back in the day, and I think they knew you best and they were involved in the recruiting process. And I think as coaches, you really got to know the true character of a kid because it was their community and their coaches, and not a lot of other entourage that went around them. And now I think there's just a lot of distractions, a lot more voices in these kids' lives, and they're jumping from team to team. And they started their local team and then they realize, oh, I'm pretty good. And so starts recruiting them to the, Detroit teams or what have you. So,
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's if you're talented and you're good, they're going to find you. It doesn't matter what team you're on. And I think parents get kind of sold a bill of goods a little bit about, paying all this money to wear what's on the front of the jersey when really what's inside the jersey matters the most.
Yeah. So to sort of switch a little bit more on the positive, I'm talking about, you mentioned some of those coaches you had. My dad for volleyball, Jim Anderson, was a huge mentor, I know, in your life, not just in your playing days in Traverse City, but beyond. Talk about what those relationships and what that mentorship has meant to you.
Well, I think if you're ever in a role to be a teacher, a coach, a mentor, whatever, you really need to understand the power that you have over the youth. And um, just for me and for you as well. I mean, I was blessed with really amazing teachers and coaches on me that really inspired me. And I have great parents. I mean, my parents are probably my greatest supporters of my role models. And I mean, I hit the jackpot when I got my mom and dad as my mom and dad, right? And
Right,
um,
right.
but you also know there's a point in your life where an outside conversation means more than an internal conversation. Your dad could say one sentence to you, but your coach could say another. And it was like the first time you ever heard it. So as frustrating as that can be, and I'm going through that now with my kids as they've gotten older. It's like I only did it for a living, was a Power 5 BCS coach, and for 31 years coach. But and my husband plays Division 1 football, but we don't know a whole lot right now.
Right.
So
Right.
it's really the power of another coach almost, believing and encouraging. And I think for me, Coach Anderson believed in me before I even knew what belief was in myself. He saw something in me and he nurtured that from the time I was a fourth grader, all the way up. And, just feel really blessed to have had his tutelage and his experience. And to this day, still is a big part of my life. And, the football coaches up there for Gary, my husband's life, Roger Wood and Jim Uli. I mean, there's just some amazing legends up there that made huge differences in both Gary and I's life in particular.
Yeah, I think we were spoiled along with our classmates as far as it's really the coaching core that was in Traverse City. I mean, just amazing names within the coaching, high school coaching world. As far as you mentioned, Roger Wood, Jim Mooley. On the football side, you had Larry Knightkirk with tennis. You had Bob and John Lober as far as golf and track. My dad was with baseball, started the volleyball program. You had Ed Hahn, with wrestling. Just the names just go on and on. And I think, too, even that loyalty of the coaches at that high school level, that Traverse City saw that in itself. Too, you see coaches hopping, around to different places. And that's, I think, another aspect that makes it hard for kids to connect. But we were sort of blessed with that opportunity of having those coaches that were also teachers within the school there itself, and they were invested into the kids' lives.
Yeah. Well, very rare situation with Coach Uli. He coached my dad and he coached my brother. I mean, they don't last that long anymore, especially at the high school level. But Traverse City football was the religion up there, as you well know. And I always kid people as everybody is excited about the end zone or Shashespeeville. But the first camp out I ever saw was when I was a, 7th, 8th, 9th grader going up to get shots up and having to step over people who were sleeping outside along the gym. So when the season tickets open for football, they could actually get the seats they wanted. It wasn't based on money or donations. It was literally first come, first serve, and people were serious about it. So there was a lot of really amazing men up there that turned boys to men, and a lot of amazing coaches up there that inspired the youth top to bottom.
Yeah, you mentioned those campouts. I remember my family actually participating in those. We always tried to we were like more around the 35-yard line for that, because there were some bleachers there where there were only a couple steps to get up to, which for myself was obviously, a huge component of that. So we had about 5 families every year, and we'd sort of rotate on that camp and camping out right there to get those season tickets. So yeah, great memories as far as growing up. In that transition though, going from Traverse City in the high school and then into your college years, where you played at Central Michigan University and had a great, amazing career there. 3-year captain, and also at the time set the career assist mark and a single season assist mark. What was your recruiting process like then compared to what a recruiting process looks like now?
A lot more grassroots, a lot more regional. I mean, outside of like Tennessee was really big back then, and Pat Summitt would come in and she would recruit some of the Detroit kids, Martin Luther King kids, high level. I was not that. I was not a Tennessee type player, but there was a lot more emphasis placed on, your local teams, Central, Western, Eastern Michigan, Michigan State. I mean, those were kind of the top teams. Actually, Central Michigan women's basketball was at the top. We would even beat Michigan State and Michigan back then. So mine was a little more grassroots. It was forged in phone calls and letters. And again, going back to your high school coach, when they could send you letters, it always went to your high school coach in care of you, and he got it at school and he would share it with you and your parents. It just seemed to be just a village of people that were working behind the scenes and with you to help guide you to decide what was best for you and what decision you were going to make.
Yeah, I think too, you had some more of those specific even high school to college sort of relationships. I know Traverse City specifically, with Central Michigan, there was almost like a pipeline of athletes from Traverse City that were going to Central Michigan on the women's basketball side. I know, like you said, you had Molly Pache, who, I sort of mentored a little bit with you, was a few years older. You had the Marleys on the basketball side, like you mentioned, your husband Gary with football. I just think those connections between the schools were even that much deeper with the coaches.
Yeah, Wendy Merriman. There was a lot of kids recruited, through and like you said, the Central Michigan. There was a lot of connection to Traverse City. I think Michigan State and Central Michigan were the two most represented growing up. And anyway, in my world, of teachers and coaches, it seemed like those were the two places you heard the most. Not that you didn't hear U of M ever, but it was mostly Michigan State and Central Michigan.
Going back a little bit just to our families, we've also been connected with different health issues. I know for myself, my dad, I know your mom's gone through different health issues, and sort of the emotions that go along with experiencing those in real life. You mentioned how you thought you won the lottery with your parents, and I felt the exact same thing. And with myself losing my dad, early this year, was such a new and traumatic thing to go through. And there's still plenty of times where there'll be something sports related that I'll want to talk to my dad and almost go directly to my phone and want to start to call him and realize he's not there. But I know you going back when you played for my dad for volleyball, there was an experience where my dad, when I was officially diagnosed with muscular dystrophy, actually came to the team and in many ways broke down. But to me, it showed the strength of what a family outside of your actual family, what the importance of that within athletics can actually hold. So I don't know if you could maybe share what that experience was, because I remember when you told me for the first time, it really hit home for me.
Yeah. Well, it was I was raised in a teacher principal house, much like you, and we were brought up to always respect our teachers and coaches. We put them on pedestals, and they had an aura and a presence about them, and everything they said we believed in, and it was no different with your dad. And so he was a really good volleyball coach, and as you mentioned, started the program, and he built a really a culture of girls that like really were unsure and brought us like to the next level. But he was always his culture, he was very matter of fact, he was very analytical, statistics, and he really studied the game. He was more of a student of the game, right? And so you always saw him in this mode, right? And never saw him get too emotional, too high or too low, which makes a good coach too. And I will never forget the day I was a sophomore, I believe, sophomore in high school. And he called us all over to the end of the gym where there was like these wooden bleachers. And I mean, I can tell you exactly where I was sitting. I remember the little metal thing under my right foot. Like it was like as clear as day. And he never does that. I mean, we have a certain warm up. I mean, your dad was a very regimented coach. This is how you do it. We do this every day. It's your discipline. This is what happens. So I knew something was off, and he took a minute and he was kind of pacing and walking around, and I didn't know what was going on. I thought I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't know what it was. I mean, I was still just a kid. But anyway, long story short, he began to tell us about your diagnosis, and he broke down and cried, and it was truly one of the most emotional experiences that to this day that I've been through. And to watch a coach like your father, who I held on the pedestal, who was so strong and driven and in a certain kind of way, to show that vulnerability. I mean, it really taught me a valuable lesson in life. And of course, saw him in a different light too, right? Which made you want to play harder, even harder for him and your family.
Right. Yep. I think that's the beauty of sports. And for someone that maybe hasn't been a part of that setting or maybe didn't grow up in that type of atmosphere, you miss that as far as what that can actually bring as far as life lessons beyond just the playing court or the playing field, whatever, athletic endeavor that is. There's so many life lessons that just organically happen through sports.
Well, and you were always around too, so you were like our manager, you were bebopping around like you had not a care in the world, and you wouldn't have known, you know, you probably had no idea what you were about to face either, even though you probably heard the words, right? So you didn't really know what that meant. You were just a kid that loved sports and loved to be around the team, and continue to do so, and still to this day are in love with sports and what that brings people. And just to see you kind of make a life of that as well is not surprising.
Well, you mentioned the coach's son being able to sort of piggyback around and get to know the older kids and have those experiences, some of the many same experiences that both of your kids been able to experience through their youth and growing up. And I think there's something to be said about that, about being sort of engulfed in that atmosphere of first people that are committed, hardworking, really striving for a goal, being able to see them put in the blood, sweat, and tears to try to get somewhere where they're wanting. I think that's a huge positive for a young kid to be able to see that and to sort of set those expectations for yourself growing up, because you want to be just like that Suzy Merchant, that John Merchant, or whether with your kids, with Jasmine Hines or Ariel Power, because, whoever it may be, it just sort of sets those expectations in your head at an early age.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have two boys that from the time they were like just a twinkle in their dad's eye have, you know, been on a court or been around sports. We're just always been just like you. And I think it just teaches things innately,
Yeah.
hard work and commitment and sacrifice and communication. And there's so many life lessons that come with sports, as you well know, and everyone in the world knows that. But to do it at such an early age, almost out of the womb, I've shared the story before where Ty was a 3-year-old and we got called into his preschool at St. Thomas. And the preschool teacher had been a preschool teacher for almost 25 years. So she's very good at her job. She's been doing it forever. And we thought he did something bad. So we go in there after school and, you sit down and your knees are like instantly at your ears because the chairs are so small. But we didn't know what she was going to say, but we were prepared that like maybe he bit somebody. I don't know. There's stole something from a kid. I don't know. Punched somebody.
Yep.
Started a food fight, whatever.
Took the graham crackers.
Yeah, something bad happened. And she said, her first sentence still put the pit in my stomach when she said, I've been doing this 25 years. And in all my time, I've never seen a child ever do this. And I still had, Gary and I looked at each other like, this could go one of two ways.
Yeah.
But then she continued with the story and saying that, every day they pull names out of a hat for different jobs, that they have that day, from line leader to weatherman to whatever. And she said, as a 3-year-old, I've never seen a 3-year-old be so excited and cheer for another kid, because when you're 3, she's like, it's always just about you and what you didn't get and who took your toy. And it's just me. And she said the whole class, Ty used to clap and cheer and was happy for everybody that got a job and their name pulled. And she said the whole class started doing that. And she said, I've never had that ever in all the time I've ever taught. And I said, I'm going to take that one step further. This is a great story, and I appreciate you sharing, because that's all he's ever seen is come and cheer for other people. But my boys are growing up as young men, and now they're getting to the age too where they're, 17 and 13, and they're starting to see things a little differently with girls in particular. But they grew up cheering for girls. They grew up cheering for women and girls, and their mom, who was a head coach. So I think they've seen life, not only through a teamwork and what that takes, but they've seen it on a whole nother level about cheering for women and what that's going to do to them as husbands and fathers someday.
Yeah, I agree. And even for myself, you mentioned as that young kid under my dad, sort of there around volleyball practices. I think even that for myself, being able, like I said, to see high school girls just working so hard and coming together as teammates, working for that common goal. And then while also having that experience with the baseball team, it was no different. They were working just as hard. My dad had the same expectations for his guys as he did for the girls. And I think that most in some ways maybe subliminally soaked in to myself. And that was something growing up that I hold dearly. I think too, for myself, having a physical disability and also being in love with sports, there's been plenty of times where I've been oppressed or discriminated or, haven't been able to have that same equal playing field. And I think that's also what's in many ways driven me towards women's athletics. Not that in any way I would ever say I know what it's like to be a female, but there's commonalities as far as, the oppressions that have taken place over the years and opportunities. And for myself, I know when I was doing radio for the women's program, plenty of my friends would always say, oh, is your goal to be able to do the men's games. And no, I would almost just sort of laugh in their face and say, no, I'm where I want to be. This is sort of my mecca. This is my dream. This is where I want to be. And I don't have that goal of going on the men's side because I don't see that as being superior. I don't see that as being, a step up. I'm in my own mind, at an equal level. And that, for me, I think came from that early integration, as far as being able to be a kid on both a girls' team and a boys' team as a coach's son.
Well, and I think the power of social media now has helped the women's sports too. I think there's a lot more people that are aware and cheering, and it's been in the forefront a lot more, certainly from professional to college and Olympics. And so I think as a society, we've all just sort of stepped up our game when it came to being inclusive and aware that women are just as good at athletes as men, maybe differently in their own realms, but it's still a fun game to watch and support and be part of.
Yep, yeah, without a doubt. I think too, sort of comically now, we're seeing sort of on the WNBA side, we're even seeing some of what I would call the childness or the pettiness that you see in men's athletes. It's no different on the female side. There's jealousies, there's wants. I think that, like I said, maybe the Pandora's box side of, sort of becoming on that equal level, that you also see the negatives of what comes with being in the spotlight. But obviously the positives way overpower anything along those. But I just think it's funny. People are shocked that you have all these different personalities going around in the, whether it's WNBA, whether it's soccer, any sport, but that's no different than any of the egos and jealousy and pettiness that you see on the men's side too.
Right. Well, and you're talking about Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and the dynamics between that now, probably more than anything. It'll be interesting kind of to see as this transitions. I feel for both of them. They're both, at the end of the day, they're both really good at their craft and they're very passionate about the game and they're very talented players. And unfortunately, that's not where the conversation has taken. And I feel bad because I think Caitlin's been put in a position she never anticipated nor wanted, and other people are speaking and making it into something it's not. And I feel like the same way on Angel's side. I mean, I don't think Angel has really, they kind of villainized her and they kind of uplifted Caitlin, and then on other markets it's the opposite. So it just depends on who's doing the speaking. So it's just unfortunate that we can't just really appreciate both of them for the skills and the talent that they have.
Yeah, you mentioned the skills and the talent. I know both of them as high school players. You recruited to come to Michigan State. The opportunity to watch both when Angel, she started at the University of Maryland in the Big Ten, and obviously Caitlin Clark at Iowa. So being able to see them play and, really raise also the game of women's basketball with their abilities, it's just been fun.
Yeah.
I love being able to turn on my TV now and see women's basketball, because go back even as much as you even say 2 years ago, and that just wasn't the case.
Right.
In March Madness, and even then it was sort of that swing coverage that they have. It was different than sort of just that normal everyday ability to sit down and watch a women's game.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch the notoriety and the expansion and the excitement and all of that goes with that. But yeah, we recruited. So Nia Clouden, who played for me, played high school ball with Angel Reese. So we knew about her pretty young and we recruited her. And she really wanted to stay close to home. Her brother was going to Maryland. So there was that big connection at the time. And then obviously we recruited Caitlin from the time she was in 8th grade. I think we offered her, and I was on the phone with her a few times. But she basically said she's staying in state and she's going to be a Cyclone or a Hawkeye. And she turned everybody down from Stanford to Duke to UConn, so South Carolina. Didn't matter who you were. Those were the only 2 schools she was considering. And she did that pretty early, which I thought was probably healthy for her. It can get pretty crazy if you don't narrow things down quick.
I think you also have to give her credit. I mean, she had that love for those programs growing up as a kid, and, she wanted to be able to take them to that next level, even though I has had some previous success on the national level, but being able to turn down some of those big names for your home state schools, I think also says a lot about the character. And honestly, Angel did, like you said that same thing that first year, staying home and going to Maryland.
Yeah, because both of them could have gone to the South Carolina or the UConn of it all. They could have. And I just think it's really refreshing to see people that want to kind of stay in their own state and make the most of it.
Now, going back a little bit, or I should say entering into your own coaching career, I know you started as an assistant at Oakland. I believe you were there for 3 years, and then you were named the head coach at Saginaw Valley State University. I believe also there for another 3 years. And then it was on to Eastern Michigan, and while you were coaching there, that you had the birth of Tyler, your first son, and was at Eastern for nine seasons, and then got the call and was given the head job at Michigan State, where also Brady was born, but all within the state of Michigan. And I don't think that's very common at all for anyone when you look at, first of all, their high school and then their college playing years and then their whole coaching career being within one state. So what has that meant to you to be a true Michigander throughout your whole career on the basketball side?
Well, I think I got a little lucky, along the way. I think it was a situation where I was at the right place at the right time, and women's basketball was, Oakland was a good program as an assistant. Then being able to take the Saginaw job as a head coach at 25 really propelled me, prepared me. I probably did a lot more wrong than I did right, but at least it wasn't in the national news like it can be now. You know what I mean? Like every text message and everything's recorded. So, I mean, I thought I learned a lot about myself as a coach. And then Eastern Michigan was kind of a rough takeover too, because they just hadn't won ever. And I think it was like 13 or 14 years. And everyone told me don't take the job because it's a coach killer job. And in the end, I decided, heck, if they can win on the boys' side, I grew up with 2 brothers. I feel like I can do it. So took the job. Unfortunately, we did well enough and won a couple championships and postseasons and parlayed into heading to Michigan State, which so very fortunate.
Yeah.
Well, it's very unusual because I have a lot of friends out there that even former players are in the coaching business and they want to get back home. And I just realized, gosh, I really was lucky to never really have to leave home.
Yeah, I think you sort of minimized even the level that you were able to take Eastern Michigan to. I mean, you go back and look at the annuals, and as I said, you really put them on the map as far as in the MAC conference, being able to win titles, being able to get to postseason tournaments. And obviously that was a big stepping stone, and that's what the MSU program, saw when they came and, brought you on board, whether it was at that point, Luana K. Simon, who was President Mercallis as the athletic director. I think that strong foundation. And I think, too, you can't discount the fact with Izzo being, a Northern Michigan UP sort of homegrown product, had proven himself. And they sort of wanted to mirror that, I think, on the women's side. And, they were able to do that.
Well, and I think Michigan State's kind of built on people who've kind of come up the right way, made the right steps, and I like even D'Antonio. He had spent time at Michigan State, but he had worked at lower levels, and you just the blue collar type, I guess, the roll up your sleeves and don't demand charter planes and more money and more this, more that. Just I mean, gosh, I used to recruit in a tent when I was at Saginaw Valley. We didn't even have a recruiting budget, so I used to pack my tent for $9. I could be at the KOA and, watch a week of camp at 5 Star or wherever I was. My parents weren't too happy about it, once they found out I was doing that when you're a young 24, 25, 26-year-old. But I thought I had my putter next to me, Mo, so I was ready to take on any intruder. And I did, and I had that little baby lock that I felt really secure and safe. Those little baby locks like that you put on your luggage. So I felt like I was I was good, but Yeah, I think, Michigan State's kind of always that's been their MO. So kind of getting back to Izzo, he's kind of the same way, just kind of a guy that worked his way up. And I think they appreciate coaches like that.
Yeah, can you also talk about, I know, so lots of schools, there's animosity between the men's program and the women's program. And it always seemed like, I'm sorry, at Michigan State, that none of that, at least on the surface or at least publicly, there wasn't anything along those lines. And if anything, there was just mutual support and that will and want for both programs to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was genuine. I mean, I still talk to Izzo to this day, every couple of weeks usually. For 16 years, I'd park and come through the men's side, and we'd sit every morning for about half hour, 45 minutes, and just kind of talk about the state of the game, things that he had going on, things that I had going on in my program. And I think we became, really, really close through that. And, but he genuinely cares about all the coaches, there. And, he makes time. And I think when you're the king of the castle, you can be a king that, you know, is untouchable, and he is not. He is a king of the people, a man of the people, I guess you can say. And it starts with him. And I think because he sets that tone of, he really is a simpleton. I mean, he just is who he is. He doesn't change who he is. And I think we really connected. And so it was a really special relationship for a lot of years. And, I do miss him. I do miss the Italian crazy rants and raves. And I always was marveled at some of the swear words he could put together, so many of them in a sentence and still actually make sense. I was like, man, that was impressive.
Yeah. Rumor has it too that Izzo always had the best ice as far as in the men.
Yes, he did. I used to.
Offices.
Yeah, he knew I was an ice girl, and he had the
Truth,
nugget ice.
truth to those rumors.
Yes, sir. I used to go in there all the time. He'd be in the middle of a meeting. He'd be like, "Come on in, get your ice." It was funny. But yeah, no, he's just a really good person and a great representative of Michigan State. But even he, with the state of everything right now, I think he loves coaching, which is why he's still doing it. I think the profession troubles him and bothers him.
Well, I think unfortunately for many professions where you have youth involved, there's so many politics that also enter that. I know even for my parents as teachers, I remember them saying, if I could just go into school, close my door, and be with my kids, it would be the best job in the world. But there's so many other outside voices, people chirping, thinking they know this, they know that, or different policies that come in. It takes away from that joy of doing what you do best, which is teaching or coaching. And I think that's a shame.
Yeah. Well, and the changes, I mean, if you don't change with the times, and there's always changes in every profession, but the drastic ones of adding West Coast teams to the Big Ten, most all for money. That's what it is. Ridiculous to me. The NIL. I mean, I'm not against kids getting something, but where's the value of the education? I guess I still had a little old school mindset. Now you throw in the portal. And I remember I didn't start until I was 9 games into my freshman year. And I was so mad about it because I felt like, man, I'm better than that guard out there that was a junior, but I didn't get to start. So my parents, instead of saying, well, let's go somewhere else or, think about quitting or transferring, you rolled up your sleeves and you worked harder to prove that you were the person that should be running the show and be getting the playing time. And I think I learned a lot and grew up a lot, and I learned by failure. And now sometimes with these transfer portals, you're getting kids that have been to 3-4 different schools. And then I just read yesterday, now they're going to clear any kid that has cannabis and, marijuana in their system, that now Division I athletes that's not a problem anymore. And I'm like, wow, like, I don't know, where are we going? It's a slippery slope. And so that's kind of why I go back to, like, I really did love the coaching part, but it was all this other stuff that was just a lot. Then you added Nassar and the mass shootings and at Michigan State. There was just the social or the racial riots and the George Floyd incident. It just seemed like a lot in a short period of time. And I didn't realize it at the time, but because I was, in it. But looking back now, I was like, I can feel like I'm a different person because you don't realize how those stresses and all those outside influences and the fire is always, I mean, you always got to put a fire out, that is going on every single day, and how you're really not present, and it does change you as a person, it really does.
Yeah, you mentioned all those things, and obviously it was very public. You went through some multiple health scares while you were coaching at MSU. I believe the first time was on the sidelines for MSU. I believe that was against Penn State at home. Then there was on the road at Rutgers, and then the most recently just driving on the way into practice. Can you explain as a mom what that was like having to go through those experiences so publicly when you had two young boys that were so vulnerable to those outside influences and, everything that they had to sort of go through and those emotions that you saw in them?
Well, the first one was really tough because, as you mentioned, at home, and they were young and they saw me pass out on the sidelines, and immediately, like, emergency personnel and, whisk me back and get me out of there. And it was on the national news and the ticker at ESPN or whatever. So it was definitely something they were aware of. And I'll never forget. And when you have a heart incident, of course, they're going to put those electrodes on you, and it looks scary if you don't know what's going on, which, what young kid would. I mean, I think they were 7 and 4 at the time, or 8 and 4, something like that. So they didn't know. And Ty, I've never seen my son like that. I mean, he's a pretty tough kid, and now Brady will, he's got a bigger heart and emotional intelligence, where Ty is just kind of a very like focused, competitive child. Two very different kids, and in their gifts. But I've never seen Ty cry like that, and I felt so terrible as a mom. And he was sobbing, and he was like almost hyperventilating, and he thought I was dying. Like, you don't know when you're a kid. So I
No.
felt, and then they put me in the ambulance, and it was a very scary time for them. And then obviously the Rutgers, I was on the road, so I was able to, they didn't see that. And then, so the incident with the car accident, they ended up, coming up to the hospital. So they were aware, but they weren't, thank God, in the car. I would never forgive myself if, my incident led to something tragic for them. So it was time. I mean, I did have health issues. I had heart issues, and I ended up going to Mayo Clinic and getting, getting them diagnosed. And now I'm better with through medication and, things that I needed to do. And they were just undiagnosed since I've been a kid, and electrical issues in the heart and some of my cardiovascular issues. So they just don't talk to each other very well. And that was the issue. And they've been able to figure out how to make them coincide a little bit better, so I don't have episodes where I pass out. I still have episodes, but nothing where I lose consciousness, or at least I haven't at this point.
I know, obviously we have lots of mutual friends, and one of the first things they always ask me is how you're doing, and they want to know about your health. So obviously very good to know that that's, I would say, as much under control as can be. And, you've been able to get more answers. I know you were able to go to Mayo, as you said, and even through that sort of was through a personal connection that you had, that you were able, to get in, because that's such a difficult thing just to be able to get in to Mayo Clinic. But you and I have both been able to be fortunate enough where on the medical side we've had some of those personal connections. And I think too, it's also a reflection of our families, of sort of our well-beings, of how we strive to lead our lives, that there's other people out there that also notice that respect that. And I think most people in this world are good people. Unfortunately, it's all the negative that tends to receive the publicity. But I think definitely, as Luke Bryan would say, there's more good out there than not. And both of us have been blessed by the gifts of other people in our lives.
Yeah, I'm absolutely. I mean, the connections that we've had through Michigan State and our other connections in our lives has certainly helped us along the way. Yeah, it's challenging times when you don't have your health, and you've been through that. When not long ago you were in a scary situation. So I think, y'all really appreciate the present moment, and you try to get as much as you can out of the time that you have.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and I do want to touch on that just briefly, just to share with others sort of my appreciation for your friendship, what you've been able to do for me. But it's hard to believe, but in a couple weeks here, it'll be 5 years from when my episode, I'll just call it, actually occurred and was literally within moments of losing my life. But that was back in 2018 on July the 7th. And as that was going on, my dad actually did reach out to you, and you happened to be on a recruiting trip as I was there in the ER and ICU, just to speak of your character, of your friendship and your priorities. You were there recruiting in Kentucky and literally dropped everything and got in your car and came to be with me in the ICU.
Yeah, that was a really scary call to get from your dad, for sure. But there's not many people I would drop e- everything and anything for, particularly in the month of July recruiting, because that's such an important time. But you are definitely one of those people that I knew I had to go. So I got my car. I think I got there about 2 o'clock in the morning, and your mom and I spent a couple nights next to each other, sleeping. I'm doing a little slumber party there at Sparrow Hospital, but it was a really scary time for all of us, and just watching your courage though and your strength through it all. And I don't know, I marvel at you and your positivity and the outlook you have. And even in one of your darkest moments, you could sense that, you were worried about your mom, you were worried about your dad, you were worried about your brother and your niece and nephew. There was just so much love in your heart for others that you almost felt bad going through. You almost died. Really, it was to that point, and to see you still care about everyone else except for yourself. And it's the reason why I got in the car and drove to see you, because it was something that I wasn't not going to be there.
Yeah, like there was 5 months in the hospital. There were actually 3 different times where nearly passed, but having gone through this last few years with my dad and his health issues, and with him passing away this last January on the 22nd, sometimes I think it is easier on the patient side than the emotions and the stress that's on the loved ones side. Not that I would ever want anyone to have to go through any health issues, but sometimes it's easier just to put your head down, fight, and go after things than to see somebody else have to go through some of those same battles.
Yeah, well, fight you did. There's no question. You're Spartan strong, and then obviously got yourself where you needed to be, and was working for us in the academic side and women's basketball, on top of obviously the radio stuff. So you've always really been, part of our basketball family over there at Michigan State, but then including you in the academic advising, which is what you really did as a career at Michigan State, just really enhanced. In fact, I had dinner with Terry McCutcheon on Monday night and her family, and we were talking about advising and her neuroscience major, and she even brought you up. She said, if it wasn't for Mo Gerhardt, I'm not sure I would have been able to finish and graduate, because there was some snafus that were going on with it in advising at the time. So she actually brought up your name and was really grateful for you and how you helped her in advising and got her through, really.
Yeah, they're all my favorites, but Terrence right there at the top with all of them. Such amazing relationships. And it was something that I'll always cherish. I know you said that I was able to give to the program, but in my mind, it was tenfold the opposite way what I was able to receive. I think everybody needs a purpose. Everybody needs a purpose in life. And it was through those young ladies that I was able to find my purpose. And that also gave me that drive, that will to fight, to go on, because in many days they told me they needed me. They wanted me in their life. I think that's huge. And for people that don't have or aren't able to find that purpose, I can see how life can spiral so quickly. And that's it's vital to be able to have those types of relationships to be able to keep moving and keep fighting.
Yep. Well, even knowing your office was there, I think inspired you. You kept saying, I got to get back. I got to get back, and we had you, we built a little office for you and you were seeing kids there. And yeah, you inspired us all. No, I mean, it's even by doing this podcast, it doesn't surprise me that you want to reach more people and do more for others. And that's what you're about.
So I've always felt a little bit of a life calling that it's, sort of my purpose to be able to reach out to others. When my dad passed, got lots of letters from former students about how he impacted their life. And it was amazing how many students that sort of painted themselves as a picture of the student that was falling through the cracks at the time when they were going through high school. But yet my dad was the one that noticed them. My dad was the one that would talk with them and make them feel like they had worth, they had value. And that, like I said, everyone needs to have that purpose. And hopefully we can reach people and make them feel uplifted by these stories. Then it's exactly the gift that they give. I know through your time as coaching, one thing I want to lastly hit on here is outside of just the games, the practices, and the players, you also had a huge impact in the community here in the East Lansing area. And one of the programs that you started when you were coaching there at Michigan State was the Empower program and outreach program. So if you can touch on that, let folks know really what that was all about, because that is still going. And sometimes we talk about legacies and say, oh, we don't need to have that recognition or that thoughts about us after time has gone by. But that's such a huge, huge positive in the community for young girls that is so desperately needed. And that was all primarily through your efforts to begin with to get that started.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely took on a life of its own in a positive way. And I just love being part of the vision that saw a real need for, we kind of targeted fourth and ninth grade girls, and we wanted to give them skills and strategies really to deal with what's coming at them at such a younger age. Girls' world in social media. How do you handle like what comes at you when a young girl sees like a group of her friends at a party and she's not there, or vice versa? How do you handle unfriendly friends? What do healthy relationships look like? And we gave them opportunities to learn how to meditate and breathe. And, where they saw differences in each other, they also saw they're not alone, and that there's a lot of young girls that have the same challenges and concerns and worries and stresses. And my goal is if we could save one girl in the world of the Empowerers. At the end, there was about 500, 600 kids that were coming through there. If one of them just made a better decision or something we taught them made a difference in their life, then you felt like, I felt really good about what we were doing. And it just really resonated. I mean, it was real easy to get an organizing committee to raise money as sponsors. I didn't really realize the need that it had, and just sharing why I started it with people certainly had everybody jumping on board. And I think for once people realize that it does take a community. And as a parent, we all need help. And sometimes it's programs like this that just kind of get a young child over the hump and get them on the right path again.
Yeah, and I know you said if it could just touch the life of one girl. Well, you mentioned 500 to 600 that were enrolled in that each summer. So it's obvious that was touching more than just one life. But I think too, it just speaks volumes of who you are as a person, and also just your coaching experiences and the relationships you still have with your former players. You mentioned going out with Karen McCutcheon and her family. I know too. I mean, you've housed girls at your house that have lived there for many extended periods of times. Going back to different players you can think of, like Kendra Johnson. She had Destiny, her baby, while she was still playing for at Michigan State, and hearing her talk about how you were such and continue to this day to be such a positive role model for her and also impacted Destiny's life. I just think there's so much that you can be proud of. I know we're in an age where everything comes down and many times to wins and losses. But one thing I can say is that definitely you won at the game of life. And because of that, you spread that wealth amongst everyone else that you touched along the way. So that's something I think you need to always hold close and dear to your heart, because that can be lost real easily. When we're trying at this day and age just to look at a results-driven professions.
Well, I appreciate that. I definitely picked a profession where it was easy to see if you were doing well at your job or not. A big scoreboard, a jumbotron. People kind of knew, but hopefully, to me, it was always about the relationships. That's how I got into it. Why I stayed in it was because I really did value connecting with young women and being a difference and hopefully making a difference in their lives. So, yeah, I mean, many have lived with us, but even the ones that didn't, when you get a text on a Mother's Day or a picture of their new baby or, invite to their wedding. I mean, life is short and it's never about the wins and losses necessarily. It's about what you hopefully made an impact on people's lives. And I enjoyed my time, and now I get to spend most of it diving into my boys who have missed a lot of their mom,
Yeah.
growing up. So I get the next 6 years with Brady and, these next 3 with Ty, and that's been really powerful for me.
Yep. Well, you know how much both my parents lo- love you, and I can tell you when my dad would talk about you to other people within the community. I can share this with you. He would say that obviously Tom Izzo, very endeared within this community, but it sort of goes back to winning championships with Tom. Love where he was able to take the program. The expectations year in and year out are almost championship or bust. And he'd say, that's great. And Tom's a great guy. But the reason that people love Suzy Merchant is because who Suzy Merchant also is outside of being a coach. And I just
I
want
didn't
you
know
to be
that.
able to, yeah, that was his go-to statement. And there's 100% truth within that. And I want you to be able to know that, especially with his passing, that's something that still sticks deeply in my mind. And it's something I now share with other people. I'm trying to continue that story, that legacy I'm on, because it's 100% true.
I appreciate that. And to hear that from my former coach about me as a person, I don't know, it just makes it even more special coming from your dad.
Yeah. Well, thank you. But honestly, that's going to wrap up this episode of One More Moment. Suzy, a huge thank you for joining me. Sharing your incredible journey, your insights, your wisdom. It's truly been inspiring to hear about all of your experiences from your early days in basketball to becoming a trailblazer and mentor in the sport. I hope that you found my conversation to be as insightful and motivating as I did, and I hope the audience found Suzy's story to be something that will remind them of the power of perseverance, the importance of leadership, and the impact we can have on others when we stay true to our passions and values. So whether you're an athlete, a coach, a mom, or someone looking to make a difference in your community, there's something to learn from Suzy's experiences. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe to One More Moment on your favorite podcast platforms. By subscribing, you'll never miss an episode, and you'll help me continue to bring you inspiring stories and valuable insights from incredible guests just like Suzy. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave me a rating and a review. Your feedback not only helps me improve, but also helps others discover this podcast. And don't forget to share this episode with your family and friends or anyone else who could just use a little inspiration. Stay connected on social media for behind the scenes content, updates on upcoming episodes, and more. I love engaging with my listeners and hearing your stories and about how you're making the most of every moment. As always, thank you for tuning in and being part of this community. Remember, life is made up of countless moments, and it's up to us to make each moment count. Until next time, keep striving, keep believing, and keep making every moment a moment. It's not the diagnosis that determines your outcome. I'm Mo Gerhart, and this is One Mo Moment. See you next time.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of One Mo Moment. We hope you were inspired by the incredible stories and insights shared today. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Don't miss our upcoming episodes where we'll continue to explore the pivotal moments that shape extraordinary lives. Stay tuned for more inspiring guests, powerful stories, and valuable lessons that will motivate and move you. Join us next time for another unforgettable One Mo Moment. Until then, remember, it's not the diagnosis that determines your outcome.